France and Italy are two EU member states that share deep cultural and historic ties. They are sort of like siblings, and just like siblings, are prone to compete against each other. Whose language is more beautiful? Who has more artistic achievements? And who has the superior cuisine? But among the more serious of these competitions is, who owns Mont Blanc, as it's known in French, or Monte Bianco, as it's known in Italian, Europe's highest mountain, right at the French-Italian border? According to, oh well, actually Mr. YouTuber, Mount Elbrus near the Russian-Georgian border is technically Europe's tallest mountain. Shut up. Anyways, the disputed area is located in the northwestern European Alps and is even visible on Google Maps. According to France, the entire mountain, as well as these two smaller patches of land nearby, are completely within French territory, while Italy argues that the orange patches are Italian, while the mountain is split in half by the border, thereby making one side French and the other Italian. This territorial dispute originated during the Napoleonic era and continues to occasionally create tension between France and Italy even to this day. In 2020, Italy publicly accused France of interfering in its internal affairs when French authorities declared the entire mountain, including the area claimed by Italy, a special environmental zone. This introduced several restrictions on touristic activity, which especially angered the people living in Italy's Aosta Valley, who financially rely on the tourists visiting the mountain from their region. In this video, we'll explore how this territorial dispute in the middle of Europe developed and what impact it has on Italy, France, and Europe as a whole. Our story begins in the late Middle Ages, a time when Mont Blanc or Monte Bianco was not located at an international border, but in the middle of the territory controlled by the Italian noble dynasty of Savoy, who controlled the two regions adjacent to the mountain, Savoy and the Aosta Valley. All of the territory was known collectively as the Savoyard States. Due to their geographic position, the Savoyard States had to contend with French ambitions to expand into their realm, but managed to keep control over most of its territories until the French Revolution. When the French beheaded their king and established a republic in 1793, Savoy, now known as Savoy-Sardinia, was part of a wider European coalition which sought to reinstate the monarchy in France. This went pretty badly, especially when a certain man from Corsica rose through the ranks of the French military, Napoleon. He eventually took control over France after leading his armies on a number of successful military campaigns and subjugating northern Italy, including Savoy-Sardinia. Unfortunately for the House of Savoy, Napoleon decided to adjust their borders, and by adjusting I mean annexing half the country by taking the regions of Savoy and Nice. With that, the mountain was at an international border for the first time, but this wouldn't last for long. Napoleon would later annex the rest of the Savoyard mainland, but was eventually defeated at the famous Battle of Waterloo. After that, the Conference of Vienna was organized by the great powers of Europe to create a stable balance of power on the continent. The conference reversed most of the changes Napoleon made on the European map and restored Savoy-Sardinia with some extra territory. With that, the mountain was once again wholly in the hands of the House of Savoy. But while Napoleon and the French Revolution were crushed, the revolutionary ideas and nationalism they unleashed across Europe were here to stay. One of the regions most affected by this was Italy, which at the time was still divided into many small states dominated by external powers, especially Austria, but where many dreamed of a unified Italy. This dream was especially thriving in Savoy-Sardinia. The kingdom was originally envisioned by the Congress of Vienna to serve as a buffer state, but soon developed into the most powerful and ambitious Italian state, especially under King Victor Emmanuel II. Between 1848 and 1871, Savoy-Sardinia was leading the Italian unification process by fighting several wars against the Austrians, convincing central Italy to join the kingdom, and by supporting revolutionaries like Giuseppe Garibaldi, who famously brought down the entire kingdom of Naples, beginning with just 1,000 men. Savoy-Sardinia's rise greatly upset the status quo established by the Congress of Vienna, especially angering Austria, which had dominated northern Italy for decades. But all of this would not have been possible without French support, who were by now ruled by a nephew of Napoleon. But they of course didn't help out of the kindness of their heart. To secure French support against Austria, a deal was struck in 1860 with the Treaty of Turin, which saw Savoy-Sardinia cede the region of Nice and Savoy to France. Soon after, Savoy-Sardinia proclaimed itself the Kingdom of Italy, and France would help Italy obtain the Veneto region from the Austrians a few years later. With that, Mont Blanc or Monte Bianco stood right at the French Savoy-Sardinian border and later French-Italian border. But both sides soon developed different views on where the border exactly goes through, with the French believing that the entire mountain is French territory, while the Italians argued that the mountain is split between France and Italy. For the longest time, however, this disagreement was pretty unimportant to both countries, as they had much more pressing issues to deal with. Even at the end of World War II, when France and Italy readjusted their borders slightly in favor of France, Mont Blanc or Monte Bianco was not among the regions which were subject to these adjustments. The issue only began to gain some notoriety in the 1960s when France and Italy began cooperating on a tunnel through the Massif. The construction planners noticed divergences between French and Italian maps, but these did not obstruct the construction of the tunnel. This did, however, alert the local French and Italian authorities about the existence of the issue. Beginning in the late 80s, the French-Italian commission responsible for the local border management was tasked with finding a solution. In 1995, after years of hard work, they finally found it. They said that the issue is beyond the jurisdiction and that the governments of France and Italy have to find a solution instead. Afterwards, higher-ranking French and Italian officials began to occasionally discuss the issue, but despite its apparent banality, it soon became clear that both sides were completely unwilling to compromise. The French insist that the mountain was always completely within the region of Savoy, which they annexed in 1860, while the Italians argue that Savoy's border went through the mountain summit, thereby splitting it into one French side and one Italian side after the annexation, which brings us to the situation we have today. While the conflict over Mont Blanc or Monte Bianco is definitely a minor issue in the world of territorial disputes, it's nonetheless affected French-Italian relations. Since the 2000s, the issue has regularly created tensions between the two countries, as French authorities have increasingly introduced restrictions to Mont Blanc, including a ban on paragliding and pets, which angered the Italians who saw it as an infringement on their territory. Despite the occasional media circus, no actual escalation has happened thus far. In 2020, Italy made a formal complaint to the French embassy about the issue, but aside from that, nothing has happened beyond that. But why does this issue even matter? Aren't both sides part of the European Union and the Schengen area, meaning that there are no border controls for people or goods anyway? Well, yes, but there are still three factors which make Mont Blanc or Monte Bianco an important issue for some French and Italians. The first one is simply regional economics. As we touched upon before, the mountain has become an incredibly popular tourist destination with great economic importance to the nearby villages and towns of French Savoy and the Italian Aosta Valley, and that in turn makes it an important issue for local politicians and by extension higher government levels as well. The second one is the question of a jurisdiction. What if a crime is committed on the disputed area? Whose police are responsible then? Or what if a mountaineer should find something valuable here, like the remains of one of Hannibal's elephants? Which nation would get to display it in their museum? States usually hate such unclarity, especially when there might be something to gain, even if it's only in theory. The European Union does ease the discussion over jurisdiction by officially abolishing border controls between most member states for people and goods, but there is always the possibility that these controls could get reintroduced, like during the 2015 migrant crisis, or when a state should decide to leave the Union at some point. And the third and maybe biggest factor is national pride. It's probably no understatement to say that both France and Italy are very proud nations, each boasting an impressive history, rich culture and beautiful landmarks. and this pride is of course extended to Mont Blanc or Monte Bianco, which both sides believe to be theirs and which is sometimes lovingly called the roof of Europe. Therefore, owning this mountain adds to national prestige, and at the same time, settling or even losing the dispute would be seen by many people on both sides as an unpatriotic injustice, making it very difficult for both governments to sell a potential compromise to the broad public. Nonetheless, a few ideas were indeed floated around to solve the issue. One such idea was to make it a European mountain belonging to all of Europe, which unsurprisingly found very little support. And for why the European Union doesn't resolve the dispute, well, it simply can't. As you can see in this written answer from the European Commission to a question about this very issue, the European Union simply does not have the authority to determine the borders of its member states, which means that as long as the governments of France and Italy do not find a solution, the situation is unlikely to change. And so the Mont Blanc-Monte Bianco controversy will likely remain on the long list of little problems between the French and Italians, right next to issues like, should the Mona Lisa in the Louvre actually be in Italy? And was this event the best or worst moment in football history? We may never know. Anyways, a big thank you to my channel members and patrons Justin, Curtis and Rasmus for their generous support. Making these videos is really time consuming and their support is really valuable. If you enjoy the content I make, consider supporting this channel on Patreon or by becoming a channel member as well. And thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.